And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Super Inframan Allison Cook and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so very much for your incredible support.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I welcome back Kieran Woodhouse. I said your name right?
That's absolutely fine, yeah.
All right. Correct. And you have your second book out, Experiences of a Paranormal Investigator.
Yep.
And when did this come out?
Very recent, actually. I think it came out about 2 weeks ago now.
Okay.
It actually came out when I didn't mean it to.
Oh.
It was a surprise to me as much as anyone. I self-published through Amazon, and I went through all the rigmarole, if anyone knows how troublesome it is to do this, for the ebook. And that's fine, and I put a pre-order date on it for the end of April, and then I did the same for the physical copy, but it then told me that I couldn't put a pre-order date on. It was either published or not. And after spending a couple of hours getting it ready, I thought, well, I'm not going to do all this again, so I've just got to bite the bullet now and publish the physical copy. So it was like as much a surprise to me as it was anyone, really.
I wonder why you can't do a pre-order date.
Honestly, the first thing I did obviously was just hit Google and search why I couldn't do it, and it's a bone of contention from a lot of people that asking what, if you can do it for an ebook, why can't you just do it for a physical copy? So the physical copy is available now, but the ebook isn't available till the 30th of April. Strange.
Huh. Well, that's Amazon, I guess.
Yeah. I can't moan too much, because it's essentially, I do have to pay, obviously, to have it printed and stuff, but it's as close to free publishing as you're going to get, so I can't moan too much.
Yeah. Do you have to pay for the ebook as well, or no?
Yeah. So I still lose royalty on the ebook as well.
Oh,
which I don't understand.
You lose royalty. Well, that's because they take some of it for selling it for you.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I remember looking at some of my favorite paranormal authors and stuff, and thinking they release a lot of books, and they have to if that's their income, because you make so little really. Yeah. Doing it, you couldn't really rely on it as a whole income.
Yeah, you'd basically have to be a bestseller.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah. And
probably charge a significant amount for the book as well. But I'm not in that league.
So this is Experiences of a Paranormal Investigator. What was the first one called?
So the first one was called An Introduction to Paranormal Investigation.
Okay.
It was really just written to... I was getting quite frustrated. I'm sure I said in the last show, I was getting quite frustrated at people coming to our investigations under the illusion of what I've now called the most haunted effect, expecting possessions within 10 minutes of us starting and getting bored if nothing was happening. And I put it down to seeing, these entertainment TV shows and expecting that to be what ghost hunting is. And it was quite frustrating for us, really. We even had people leave after half hour because they said they were bored.
Right.
And that, yeah. It's like, well, at least we're not faking anything. We're not making stuff happen just for your entertainment. So I was asked to go and give a presentation about my ghost hunting, and then transposed that into a book. And it's really aimed at beginners, essentially, and people that are just getting into the field. So there's a chapter on each piece of equipment and my views on it and how it's used and why it's used, with some stories intertwined as well. And the new book is just the next step, really. So they've started out on their journey, and now they're going out investigating, and they're going to start having experiences. So I thought it would be best to tackle that side next and try and help them understand what they're experiencing and how they can maybe debunk it, or try and explain what's going on a paranormal level. So it's really just taking these people through a journey. But there is enough stuff in there in terms of experiences and stories, just for the average reader to enjoy, or the seasoned investigator to enjoy as well.
Yeah, and when it comes to faking stuff, how much do you think that the popular TV shows actually fake stuff versus catch stuff?
Yeah, it's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I think I genuinely believe that everybody starts out with the best of intentions.
Right.
And I think when you watch the earlier seasons of shows like Most Haunted and Ghost Hunters and that they are quite genuine in what they're doing, and there's a lot of effort put into debunk stuff, and there's a lot of effort put into trying to understand what's going on. And I really enjoyed the first few seasons of most of those shows. Mm-hmm. But then what happens is they become reliant on the viewers and the people watching it and the stats, basically, because without people watching it, then they're not going to get renewed for a second season.
Yeah.
And if people are watching it and they're not entertained, then they're going to switch off. So they have to ensure that you're entertained. And that, to me, it's not necessarily selling your soul, but it's as soon as you begin to rely on it as an income, and you begin to rely on it and on the viewers and making sure that they're entertained, you do lose credibility when it comes to being a researcher, because, as has been proven many times, that they're forced to fake things in order to keep the views up, so to speak. So I think they started out with the best of intentions, but I think along the way they are misguided by maybe the producers or the TV channels who are making them, push for more viewers, and they lose their way a little bit, I think.
I remember the first few seasons of Ghost Hunters being impressed because they weren't finding everything, finding things every case they went out to. It was like, all right, this seems legit, And then at a certain point when you had like, what was the one? Paranormal State and Ghost Adventures and stuff come up, and they're finding stuff every time, every place they go, and there's all this crazy stuff happening. And then slowly Ghost Hunters started doing the same thing. And I'm thinking, you have to do this or you're not going to have a show.
That's exactly right, and if they didn't do it and kept up with the Joneses, shall we say, they would have fallen by the wayside, and viewers would have started watching. And the thing is, most of the viewers that watch these programs, they know what it is, they know what they're getting,
right?
They're getting cheap bubblegum, and they know it, and it's this kind of give and take relationship. They're putting out what they think the viewers want, and the viewers react by giving them the viewing figures that they want and need, and on it goes. And there is, I do kind of hold a little bit of love to those shows because they got me into doing what I do, and they got plenty of other people into doing it, and I think that can only be a good thing. But I think there comes a time where, again, I've kind of called it this split, where we now have the entertainment industry and the research industry, and I don't think there can be any crossover anymore. You're either one or the other.
Yeah. And the thing is, sometimes when they fake it, it's very obvious. Yeah,
it's only a quick internet search or a YouTube search, and you can find videos to show it. But yeah, it becomes blatant. And as you've just you've hit the nail on the head where you said that they started out very straight down the line. They didn't find anything all the time, and then it's every episode they're encountering the nastiest demon going, and you think, I go, obviously pre-COVID, I was investigating at least once a week, and you're lucky if you get anything in 10 investigations in a row, and I mean anything, like a little shadow or anything, and these people are having so much activity at every single thing they do. It becomes a little bit the boy who cried wolf, I guess.
And the number of times that the main guy there from Ghost Adventures got possessed, I don't even think you can count.
Yeah, surely from a health and safety perspective, the person who's looking after him would be telling him before every investigation, don't do that again. Please don't do that again.
But it's definitely more entertaining if he's possessed.
Of course, and that's exactly all it is. It's people that go to watch WWE or WWF or whatever it's called now. The 30 or 40-year-olds that go to watch that, they know what they're getting. They know it's all fake and it's scripted. And that's what people love, and power to them if that's what they like. But I definitely would say I fall more into the research category.
And actually, I'm a big wrestling fan.
Yeah, well, it's I've got a little boy myself now, and it's something I plan on introducing to him as he grows up, because I used to love it, and I still do tune in every now and then. But again, you know what you're getting, and
Yes.
I think when you do know what you're getting, you can enjoy it a little bit more. You can relax and take it for what it is.
Right, and honestly, I've always said wrestling is one of the most real things on television, because there's no stuntmen, there's no CGI. Like, yeah, it's scripted, but they're doing it all live, and it's dangerous.
It is, and something I've always respected about them is, there's been people that have died, haven't there? Was it Owen Hart who fell and broke his neck or his back? It's just what they do. I couldn't do that. I've played rugby and stuff, but I couldn't do what they do. So the athleticism and I guess the bravery that they put on show is worth all the plaudits that they get, really. But it is still scripted.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a performance. So that's why I compare it to like a movie. Like, people don't get upset when they really, if you say to someone, "Well, Star Wars is fake," they're like, "Well, yeah," and it's like, so why are you upset when someone says wrestling isn't, a real competition?
Yeah, it's and the thing is, it's like in this country we have soap operas that, like Coronation Street or EastEnders or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like that, there are storylines, and there are character arcs, and there are wrestlers that will, who are destined to win whatever belt, and there are wrestlers who are the bad guys, and they all play their part perfectly, just like characters in a soap opera.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
In fact, there's probably more fighting in Coronation Street than there is in wrestling.
And it's probably more real than most of the ghost hunting shows.
It's again, when you watch some of the ghost hunting shows, it's I haven't now for a while, and I'll go into why, but it becomes so obvious, and it becomes, for someone who kind of, I don't live and breathe ghost hunting, but it's a big part of my life. And when you see someone almost mocking it and, ridiculing it in a way, it gets quite personal, I think. I do take it quite personally. But, it's the reason I stopped watching it was because the last time I did, my wife and I got married in April 2016. Oh, God, that's just reminded me, actually, my wedding anniversary soon. It's a good job I've remembered that. And we got married in a little, like a Victorian house in the middle of a park, and it was a lovely place, really old, loads of history. And I asked the lady if they did ghost hunts, and she looked shocked, and she said, "Oh no, that's not something we do. We would never do that." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. I respect that." We went on our honeymoon the day after the wedding. So about 2 weeks later, as we got back, I remember sitting down and putting the telly on, and Most Haunted was on, and lo and behold, they are at that very place. Now, of course, that means it must have been filmed before I'd asked,
right?
Because of all the editing and stuff. But well, what's that all about? Were they able to give them enough money? Were they able to offer enough publicity? Because I've heard that they can't actually pay for the location. So, it's rules for some and rules for the others, and unfortunately, it puts us not out of business, but it kind of monopolises the industry a little bit and prevents us from getting into certain places.
Huh. Well, maybe she didn't know.
Oh, maybe, yeah. I mean, she wasn't the manager of the house, but she was very high up, because it's essentially run by the local council.
Ah, okay.
And she it's a little museum as well there. And she was responsible for like the day-to-day running. She was showing us around and where we would get the room we'd get married in and where the guests would be and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe you're right, but I'd like to think she was kind of in charge enough to know that had happened.
Yeah. I remember an episode of Ghost Adventures. Well, I mean, one of the things I liked about Ghost Adventures is that they would actually talk about the history of the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that a lot of times more interesting than their investigations.
Yeah.
Plus, they were idiots, and sometimes that was really funny.
Yeah.
Zach picking up a snake, trying to get over his fear of snakes, picking it up by the tail. And I'm just
not seen that one.
And I'm just watching in amazement. I'm like, really, dude? Did no one tell you not to pick it up by the tail?
The same person that's like, pulling their hair out because he's going to get possessed again. He's probably just thinking, oh no, not the snake.
But I remember one where they had, a room with a bunch of cameras in it, and supposedly a coat hanger got thrown at them.
Right.
And they only show it from one angle. I'm like, where's the other angle? Because you had a camera pointed right at that door the coat hanger came through, but we're not seeing that.
Yeah, that makes you question it, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, like they would have cameras everywhere. Probably too many cameras.
Probably.
As was the case there, actually. They probably had one too many and it showed something you shouldn't be seeing.
Yeah, well, they could pick and choose. So, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's the stuff. I don't know if you've seen Most Haunted, but there's several clips on YouTube of things happening, and there's one of they have a guy on there called Fred, and he calls himself a demonologist, and there's a very famous clip now famous, where he's throwing a rock over the crew. Mm-hmm. And then the crew kind of turn around and go, what was that? And then he comes into the shot, like kind of querying what was that as well. Just as in much shock as everyone else. But several seconds before you clearly see him, just before the camera pans away, he obviously thinks the camera has turned away from him, throws a stone over the crew. And that's what they react to.
And they left it in the show?
Yeah, I don't know if it was left in the show, but if you go onto YouTube, you can find it.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't know if it was a deleted scene, but then I don't know how anyone would get hold of that.
Right, right.
So I imagine it was, like I say, I've stopped watching it years ago, but there was that one, and there was the other famous clip of Carl, who's Yvette's husband, kicking a bucket over. Just to the right of the camera. He's just in the frame. It's very unfortunate, really. But he's caught kicking a bucket over and then kind of going, "What was that?"
Right. I think I stopped watching Ghost Hunters when they did their last live one, and Grant was very badly faking stuff.
Yeah, I don't know which one that was, because I did.
It was like a decade ago at this point, almost, but
that's not the coat pulling one, is it?
Yes,
the hood pulling.
It's the coat pulling one. There was obviously a motion sensor with a tape recorder by one of the doors. Like everything happened to Grant, and it seemed, like the coat pulling one, where Jason comes over and literally pulls a wire out of Grant's coat. Which to me says, Jason's legitimately trying to do this, and Grant's probably thinking if stuff doesn't happen, we're done,
Yes, well, an interesting story with that, because I got interviewed on there's a podcast that Jason does, Beyond Reality, I think it might be called.
Oh yeah,
it was a while ago now, and the producer that kind of vetted me before I went on said, we hear that you have a few strong opinions on on the coat pulling scene. and I said, well, yeah, I do, and I stand by them. I'm not going to change my mind. And funnily enough, when I was interviewed, Jason was absent, and I was only given a 15-minute slot as opposed to the 45.
Wow.
And you can't help but wonder, was there some kind of something going on there? Was it done on purpose? Was he absent on purpose? Because I agree with you. I always thought it's Grant and Jason. Clearly, is that why they split up? Is that why they stopped doing stuff together?
Yeah.
But then when I had that response, I thought, okay, maybe he does kind of resent that a bit. Maybe he was embarrassed. I don't know. I don't want to speak for the bloke, but
yeah, that's true.
But it was definitely a weird situation to be in.
Well, they had like that motion triggered voice that literally just sounded like a tape recorder. And every time he walked by the doorway, it was like the first thing that happened, you'd hear this voice. And Jason was literally ignoring it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is fake. And you don't want to like focus on this. You're trying to get the shift away from it.
Yeah. Because that's the same. That's the opinion that I'd formed, that it was all on Grant.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's unfortunate, but if they don't get the ratings, if they did a whole live, 8-hour show and they had nothing, that would, people would be like, why am I watching this?
Exactly. It would literally be like watching two wrestlers get into the ring and sit down and have a cup of tea. And,
exactly.
That's not why I've tuned in for this.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's not a fun situation, I'm sure, to be in. I mean, it was great for a while because they were like the only ones out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely,
then they feel like they have to keep up with the competition, really.
Yeah. I do think this stuff helps normalize it in society, whether it be that, whether it be shows like Ancient Aliens or Hunting Bigfoot. I think it provides people who are interested in this stuff a way of acknowledging that, yes, I'm interested in this stuff because these shows are popular.
Yeah, I think, again, as I said earlier, they have proven useful in a way for getting people out there, and same as what you just mentioned there, programs like Finding Bigfoot and Expedition Bigfoot and stuff, for getting people out there and getting them interested in it. But I do hope that when they go out there, and as I say, the purpose of me starting these books was, I hope they don't go out and expect it to be like it is on TV, because it really, really isn't. And in fact, I have my own podcast, and I interviewed a guy who had worked a little bit on Finding Bigfoot, and he told me that the paradox of Finding Bigfoot was that the producers had told them, we can't find Bigfoot. Because if we find Bigfoot, there's no show.
Right.
So we've always just got to be on the periphery of finding him, but we never do. And I always say to my wife when we're watching these shows, look, if something genuinely happened, it would have broke by now, and it would have been all over the news and all over the internet and social media. They wouldn't have been able to keep it a secret. So that's another reason that I can't watch these programs, because nothing's ever going to happen. But it was interesting that this guy said that the producers had told them, look, it's Finding Bigfoot, but we can't, for the sake of the program, we cannot find Bigfoot.
It's like Gilligan getting off the island. You can't do that.
Yeah, that's not his purpose. And yeah, it was a hilarious. This was done off air, if I remember rightly, but it was a hilarious conversation he was telling me, because apparently they had got some quite good footage, some really good footage whilst filming, and footage that they weren't allowed to show.
Wow,
that was suppressed.
That doesn't shock me. It really doesn't. I actually had a weird paranormal thing go on when I had watched that live Ghost Hunters thing. I almost forgot all about this. So I had written up a blog, kind of ripping into it and showing where they were faking stuff before all the videos had come out. Like the night it was on, because it just annoyed me so much. And I went to sleep, and I woke up at some point, and I'm laying there trying to get back to sleep, and out of my closet comes a voice that sounds just like the one that you heard with Grant in the first segment.
Okay.
And it's like, and it repeated itself like twice. And it said, I couldn't remember what it said. Like, I wrote it down the next day, and I was like, I don't remember what it said, but it was something ridiculous. And I just kind of went, okay, so this is the universe telling me that sometimes things seem fake that aren't.
That's one way of looking at it. Yeah, or maybe Grant was in your closet. I don't know what's scarier.
Yeah, I would go with Grant being in my closet, honestly. It didn't scare me. I've had so many weird things happen in my life that most of it doesn't scare me. So it was just kind of that's weird. All right, I get it, Yeah. I get that, because it kind of gets to a point where, in fact, for me, it gets to a point where if you talk about the universe and synchronicity and stuff, and it just gets to a point where, as you say, you just kind of go, okay, fine. I know what you're trying to tell me. Yeah. It's that you don't have as much amazement, as you used to, or as much shock. It's more of an acknowledgement that it's happened, and why it's happened, maybe, and you take it on board, and Yeah. In the book, you say that sometimes people mistake you for just being a closed-minded skeptic with this stuff.
Yeah, I've had, because I give like presentations to groups around the country, and yeah, on several occasions I've had people put their hand up and say, why do you do this? Why are you even here? And I think it's just because again, they're used to watching these shows, you know, and they're used to seeing these ghost hunters who will be so desperate to tell you that ghosts are real and to push their beliefs on you. So to come across somebody that's looking at it, and I'm not the only one that does it, obviously, but to come across somebody that looks at it from more of a skeptical angle, because I always say, if you're going to go ghost hunting to prove that they exist, then you will, because it doesn't matter what you see. You'll class that as a ghost because it will back up your beliefs. And just as much the other way around, if you go convinced that ghosts aren't real, then you'll have an explanation for everything. Even if that explanation doesn't quite fit, you'll make it fit, because ghosts can't exist in your belief system. So it's better to be just somewhere in the middle, maybe err a little bit more on the latter example there, but just enough so that you try and explain it every way possible before you jump to the conclusion that it's a ghost. Because I've investigated with hundreds of people now, and I would say that it's at least 80% of those people will just jump to the paranormal as being the answer to everything that they see or hear.
Yeah, and I've met those people, definitely.
Yeah,
and some of it is odd, and some of it you're going, I don't think that was really odd enough to jump to the paranormal conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I've even had someone wake themselves up snoring and had claimed they'd heard a growl. And, you know, three of us that were there kind of go, no, you were just snoring. And they were like, no, I know the difference between a snore and a growl. And it's like these people can't be told, and you just have to leave them to it, and you have to go about it your own way and keep your head down. That's what I tend to do, and do my own little bit of research and let them have their beliefs one way or the other. But it's, you know, for me, I point out in the book that the key word out of all this is investigating. And that, you know, I actually think it's a crucial part of when you're out investigating to go around trying to debunk what you've just heard, you know, and we always make sure we do a sweep of the area and the amount of things that you pick up on, you know, before you actually start investigating. So, you know, squeaky floorboards, or a squeaky door, or a door that's prone to opening a little easier than others, or a boiler that might go off intermittently throughout the evening, are all good things to keep an eye out for. So when you're investigating, if you hear it, you think, right, that's just a boiler. I heard that before. And again, so many times people don't do that, or they do, but they're still so desperate to attribute it to the paranormal that they ignore their senses, it seems, and will push anything to be paranormal.
Well, the ghosts turned on the boiler.
He's a bit cold, and he wants the central heating on. That's what it is.
On average, how many cases do you think you investigate that turn out to be nothing versus ones that actually have genuine activity?
I don't think it's as black and white as that. I think there's maybe a sliding scale.
Okay.
So I'd say 3/4, at least 75%. There's nothing, and I mean, you know, you're trying not to fall asleep, and it's, you wish you were back at home in the warmth. That kind of level. And then I'd say, so you're left with about 25%, and 5% maybe something concrete happens that you've actually captured and you probably can't explain. And then that leaves the 20% of anything but from just seeing a shadow or hearing a footstep. But yeah, it's definitely massively heavy in favour of nothing happening at all, really.
And you talk about pareidolia in here too, which is definitely especially like if you're in a dark location. I think your eyes, if you can't see, your eyes are more prone to put together shapes in the darkness than if you can see. You know what I mean? Like the pareidolia effect is a very natural thing that we have. We detect patterns.
Yeah. It's for me that as you've just hit the nail on the head. When the human brain has to try and make sense of everything, and that's just the way that we're wired as a species. You know, we have to try and make sense of something. So if we see a jumbled up pattern, or we hear a jumbled up pattern, because pareidolia can happen in audio experiences as well.
Oh yeah.
and you have to see it. And when people say, "Oh, you can see a face in the clouds" or whatever, that's just human nature to try and see a face in things. And so when you're in the dark, I guess it's this kind of survival mode kicks in, and you've got to try and make sense of where you are and make sense of your surroundings. So people do see things and will attribute things. And as I point out in the book, I grew up with a chair in the corner of my room that I could easily, on a scary night, could easily convince myself that it looked like an old man sitting in the chair when I knew it was just a hoodie and a pair of jeans piled on top of the chair. I'd put them there myself an hour before, but with the light off, I actually, as a teenager, could convince myself to the point of being scared that it was an old man sitting in the chair. So that is exactly what goes on the vast majority of the time. And the problem is you have these people who are so desperate, and bless them, but they're so desperate to partly see that their beliefs are true. Everybody has very strong beliefs and they want to see them materialise, but also people are so desperate to maybe be in touch with a loved one or a family member that they've just lost. I remember an investigation where a very close friend of mine, her brother had very recently committed suicide, and she was adamant throughout the investigation that she could hear someone calling her name. Nobody else could. Now, not for 1 second am I saying that she hadn't had those experiences, but I just found it interesting that it was so soon after the death, and I couldn't help but consider or think or maybe explain away that what she was experiencing was just her own desperation, essentially, for wanting to have that experience.
So let's talk about weird vocalizations. I mean, that's something, people hearing their names called and audio that you can that multiple people can actually hear. What do you make of stuff like that?
It's interesting because I've been on the receiving end of those. I've had there's a local pub that we investigate regularly, and I was down in the cellar. There was about 5 or 6 of us down in the cellar, and I was just walking past the team up to the back end of the cellar, and as I just went past the last person, I heard someone very clearly shout Kieran, as clear as day, and I've turned around and just kind of, what's the matter? And they've all looked at me and said, "You heard that then?" And I was like, "Yeah, I thought it was you." And they've all gone, "No, it wasn't us." And I was like, "Right, okay," and carried on. And then about it must have been about 3 months, no, maybe about 3 months after that, I was doing a presentation, and I thought I heard someone say my name whilst I was on the stage. So I stopped my talk and said, expecting someone in the audience to ask a question, but nobody did. There was this kind of awkward silence. And I thought, oh, sorry, I thought somebody had called my name. Now, that talk was recorded by the guy who ran that group. And about 3 weeks later, he was editing the video and he sent me the clip and said, "What do you make of this?" And just before I responded and said, "What?" You very clearly hear a voice say, "Kieran." And I said to him, "Well, did anyone actually say my name?" And he said, "No, there was no one live that said your name, no one in the audience," because he remembers at the time thinking it's strange that I'd stopped thinking I'd heard something. But it backed up that I had actually heard someone call my name, and it was picked up by the camera.
And that's particularly interesting because it's in like a public place with people in the day. It's not some creepy location somewhere.
Yeah, that's what fascinated me. Because it was a very, very, and I'm not pretending to say that it was the same voice as the one I'd heard previously, but it was definitely a male voice. It was deep. It was very similar. I don't know if it's maybe someone that follows me around or someone that's attached to me. I don't know. But it was very rude of him to interrupt me while I was talking. And I have had stern words with whoever it was. But no, I think, in that instance, I thought I'd heard it and thought nothing more of it, carried on with the talk, went home, and that was it. And it was only when it was backed up on the camera to show what I'd heard. So I think there are these, vocalizations that people hear, just like pareidolia, where they can make something of it. They can make what they want of it. And there are those audio clips where it's clear as day.
Yes.
And there's something I I tend to do, where there's a fantastic program. We talk about these TV shows, but there's one that I really like. It's called My Ghost Story, and I don't know if you've heard of this,
No.
but it has about 4 or 5 like unsolved mysteries. Really, they have about 4 or 5 cases on the show, and it's the real people. It's the actual people that have lived in this house, and with actual footage that they've captured. I'm not saying that all of the footage is genuine, but you actually get to see 1 hour packed with footage, and you can make your own mind up on what you're seeing. But there's something interesting on these shows where they will play an EVP recording and give you subtitles as well. And what I did was I covered the subtitles and asked my wife to guess what she was hearing on the recording. And when I moved my arm away and she could actually see what it was saying, her guess was absolutely nowhere near. In fact, it was embarrassing how far away she got, And then when she read the subtitles, she said, "Oh, yeah, I can hear that now." And it's this kind of planting it in your head what you should be hearing, which is something we need to avoid when we're doing this kind of stuff. But I think that is the pareidolia in effect right there.
Yeah, the one of the things I used to do, and what I would try to do is if I was watching a show and they were playing back an EVP, I'd look away.
Yes.
So I didn't see what they're saying it said. It's like they'd be like, "Listen to this," and I'd be like, "Nope, not going to look." And sometimes I'd see it, and I'd be like, "Yeah, it kind of sounds like that." Then I'd wind it, and not look at the screen.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, "It doesn't sound that much like that." Like
yes.
It's that word is suggestive. It puts your brain in that mode.
Yeah, I mean, we use what's called a spirit box, and so it kind of scans through radio frequencies. So it's essentially white noise with intermittent bursts of radio sound. And we've been sat around one of those, 5 or 6 of us, and someone's asked, how many spirits are with us now, and someone will say, "Oh, I heard 7," and someone else will say, "Really? I heard 5," and "No, I heard 9." And when you think about it, as a human language, no one really can mistake 5, 7, and 9. They're completely different sounding words, different syllables, but that's genuinely what they all thought they'd heard. But so what had they heard? Who's right? I talk a lot about perception in the book, and it doesn't necessarily mean that any of them are wrong or right. But what you're seeing is someone essentially just manifesting their own beliefs onto the experience and hearing what they want to hear.
Yeah. As for the spirit box, how do you think that even works?
It's the spirit box is the given kind of description for how it works is that the spirit will use the frequencies to communicate with you. And if you actually sit down and think about it, well, how? Because if Radio 1 is playing a particular song, every time it scans through that particular signal, you're going to pick up a bit of that song. Mm-hmm. So it's not like the spirit can make those radio stations play the particular songs that it wants it to play in order to get a message across. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I've had an extremely personal experience with a spirit box shared with my brother. Did I explain this in the last interview? I'd hate to repeat myself.
No, go ahead.
So my nan died it was about 2 days after Christmas, I think. And as you do, we all gathered round. It was around my mum and dad's house. So my granddad was there, and he asked if me and my brother would go down to their house and rejig all the furniture, because they'd had the bed downstairs and stuff like that. So we went down, and I put we put the bed back upstairs, and we moved the table back downstairs. And while we were doing that, my brother, who's not really into this kind of thing, said, "Do you think she's here? Do you think we could talk to her?" And I said, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. So I went and grabbed because of course I had a spirit box just sitting in my car. I went and grabbed the spirit box, and we had a little test and asked a few questions, and we were getting back what sounded like yes. So we were asking, Nan, are you there? And we were getting back what sounded like yes. And I remember thinking, well, yeah, that could be anything really. But then I said that Granddad's at Mum and Dad's at the moment. He'll be back later. And quick as a flash, we heard Raymond. Now, what's interesting is pareidolia. It can affect multiple people, but me and my brother both were looking at each other, going, "Did that just say Raymond?" So we'd both heard that, the exact same word. And Raymond is my granddad's name, so I thought, well, that's a bit strange. That's a bit more unique than just getting the word yeah. So I said, "Yeah, Raymond, granddad. He's at mum and dad's," and that was followed by Adrian, which is my dad's name. And I thought, what's the chances of this? And I said, "Yes, Adrian, Dad." And then she said, "Kieran." But she said it like Kieran. She never used to call me Kieran, which is how you would say it. She missed out the E, I think, and just went with Kieran. And that's what we heard. And I remember my brother looking at me and mouthing the word Kieran. And I was like, so now we've had Raymond, Adrian, and Kieran, how she would say my name, literally within 10 seconds. What is the chances of that?
Yeah.
So I at that point, my brother said, "Where are you now? And what's going on?" And then it kind of went a little bit muffled. It almost sounded like there was a conversation going on, and we heard the voice say, "They're my grandchildren," and as if someone had asked her who she was talking to, and she was answering them. And so again, they're my grandchildren. And anyone that uses a spirit box, to get a phrase is really difficult. You get odd words. So to get a phrase and for it to involve the word grandchildren, so that's 3 personal names and the very, the very thing that we were, which was grandchildren. And my brother said, "Who are you talking to? Where are you?" And at this point, the voice said, "Terrifying." And we thought, terrifying, this isn't nice. And we're going, what's terrifying? What's terrifying? And at this point, the thing stopped. And I was like, oh, no. So,
of course.
I know. It was like, it was almost like it was planned. And my granddad's now dead, bless him. But so I can say it now. But at the time, I was banging the spirit box on the coffee table. I daren't tell him when he was alive. He loved that coffee table. But I was banging it on the coffee table, trying to make it come back. And eventually it did. It kicked back in, about 10 seconds of static. And my brother's shouting now, what's terrifying? And we just had the word God. And at that point, I dropped the spirit box and went outside, because I don't believe in God. And I couldn't cope with that. My brother stayed and picked it up, and apparently it told him to go to the bedroom, and it fizzled out. It didn't really go anywhere then. But we don't know what that is. She died about 7 hours before, and we don't know whether she was in some kind of limbo. The way she was talking to people, was she in some kind of waiting room with other people, and she was just scared. She didn't know what was going on. But the whole experience was about 2-3 minutes. And as I say, to get as personal the names that we got, the word grandchildren, and we both heard it. This wasn't me telling him what to hear, as we've just discussed. We were both kind of mouthing the words to each other, and then to get that final bit with the God is terrifying bit just really pushed me over the edge, I guess.
I mean, I've heard a lot of interesting stories about spirit boxes and people who swear by them, who seem to be, like yourself, seem to have a more skeptical view of things, but have had experiences that are hard to explain with them. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I don't always know how to assess that. I want to know how the spirits are manipulating these things, and I almost wonder if we're manipulating them, like if the spirit is communicating through us and we're the ones actually manipulating the box.
That's a very interesting concept, because it kind of touches on what I allude to in the book, where essentially we manifest our own reality. It's a big belief of mine that we manifest our own reality. And in doing so, we therefore manifest our own beliefs. And I've touched on this very briefly earlier, but, and as I say in the book, anyone that's religious will see the Virgin Mary. She never seems to appear to someone who is a massive skeptic in terms of religion. Right. You have to be religious to have a vision of the Virgin Mary. If you go hunting Bigfoot, chances are you will see a Bigfoot. And what I think is happening is we're all experiencing the same paranormal experience. If you were to strip away the universe down to its coding, it would essentially be the same code, whether that would be a UFO or a Bigfoot or a ghost. But what happens is we manifest our own beliefs onto that experience, and therefore what we get back is what we want back. You want the Virgin Mary, you'll get the Virgin Mary. And this is just something I've been kind of throwing around in my own head for a while now, this theory, really. And it is just a theory. So for anyone listening, I'm not saying this is in stone. I'm not saying this is what it is. It's just a theory.
Right.
But yeah, I think, so that I go back to that friend of mine that was hearing her dead brother's voice calling her name at that investigation. We couldn't hear it, but it doesn't mean that she wasn't hearing it.
Yeah.
She wanted to hear it so much. And what happens when you think about this theory is the lines then begin to blur between reality and imagination. Because you could say, well, if she was hearing it, it was all in her mind, it was all in her imagination. Yeah, but if her reality is in her mind, and she is manifesting her reality through her mind, then where does imagination end and reality begin?
Yeah, I don't think there is a line there.
No, that's where I'm going with it. I think that's.
Have you ever read Patrick Harper's stuff?
No.
You should check out Demonic Reality sometime. I think you'd really, really like some of his ideas.
Let me just make a note. What was that called?
Demonic Reality, not demonic, demonic, like Damon.
Yep.
From Patrick Harper.
Demonic Reality. I always keep a pen and paper so I can take notes like this. Patrick Harper.
And the thing about, so you say, well, like her hearing the voice, the way I would look at that is that she's hearing that voice. Whether or not that voice is coming from outside of her or not is another question, but she is actually hearing the voice. I mean, her subjective experience is real.
Yeah, and again, a big thing that I've had lately is my kit bag and the equipment that I use has shrunk so much. Normally when I do these kind of shows, the generic questions are, what kit do you use? What's your favourite piece of equipment? And it's getting more and more difficult to answer those kind of questions because I'm using less and less equipment. And I'm actually coming round to the realisation that the best piece of equipment is yourself. Yeah. Because you can trust yourself. Other pieces of equipment can be faulty. The batteries can run out. They can be interfered with outside sources such as electricity and stuff like that. So you can really trust yourself. And if you lie and if you tell someone that you've seen something and you haven't, well, that's your fault. And you have to kind of go to bed that night knowing that you've lied. But if you've experienced something, whether the person stood next to you has or hasn't experienced it with you, if you've experienced something and you know how that made you feel and it was very real to you, that's all that matters. Yeah. And the future of evidence, I don't hold out much hope for, because it's going to be very easy to alter evidence. And you could show the best piece of evidence in the world to someone and they'll just cry CGI or Photoshop. Sure. If they don't want to believe, they won't believe. There's no telling them. But if you know you've had that experience, then what does it matter if Joe Bloggs is denying your experience or is having a laugh at your experience? As long as you know what you experienced was real to you, that's really all that matters.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my way of looking at this stuff is this stuff happens, whether it be ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs. We've been seeing this stuff for as long as we have recorded history. We don't always call it the same thing. It's interpreted different ways. I mean, Jacques Vallée showing that, the fairy faith is pretty much the UFO phenomena is probably the best example of that. But I mean, there's wild men accounts, there's Bigfoot accounts, there's all this stuff. There's no doubt that people are having these experiences. What we don't know is what these experiences actually consist of.
Yeah, and I think, I think you were going down the path there. That's why I kind of had that little bit of a pause, because I thought you were going to say what I'm going to say, which is essentially they are all the same experience. I genuinely believe this now. Because if you think that when people have these experiences, particularly in the ghost world, now we've become very stale in the spirit investigation world, because we assume that this energy that we're communicating with, this paranormal entity, it belongs to a dead person. And we ask the same questions because of that. So because of this predetermined belief that a spirit once belonged to a dead granddad or a dead mom, and Bigfoot is this, big, hairy, physical animal,
Right,
flesh and
right.
blood type animal. Having that predetermined belief predetermines where you can go with your investigations. It almost kind of sets out this tunnel vision type questioning or road that you can go down with your investigations. Believing that aliens, for example, come from other planets limits where you can go with your research.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'm starting to get my head around is that effectively there is this as I call the collective consciousness. And when my body dies, my consciousness will rejoin that collective consciousness. And therefore, when people say that they've seen their dead mom at the end of the bed, or they've spoken to their dead brother, for example, they genuinely believe that is their dead brother. There's one point of energy that once belonged to their brother, and it is now doing whatever it's doing outside of our perception. But I would argue that actually, the person that saw their dead mom and the person that saw their dead brother on different times, they're actually experiencing the same thing. It's that same collective consciousness. And the reason that it can manifest itself as the dead mom or the dead brother is because it was once the dead mom and dead brother. And it knows everything there ever was. It knows everything there will ever be and everything that there is, because it is everything. So it can mimic your loved ones, because it was once your loved ones. And again, you're tuning into that collective consciousness and you're manifesting what you want to see. So you want to see your dead mum, and that is how it will present itself, as your dead mum. And I'm beginning to see that that's how it works, and I would argue that aliens are interdimensional, not actually interplanetary, and they're all existing in this world, just on alternate frequencies outside of our extremely limited perceptive range, the 0.05% of the light spectrum that we can actually interact with. I believe all of these entities, these energies, these frequencies are existing outside of what we can interact with.
Yeah, they're always here with us. We just can't see them most of the time.
That's right. And in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine the weekend, someone that I hadn't spoken to for years, 14 years, I couldn't believe it. And he told me that his wife had seen a reptilian in her bedroom. And I remember looking at him thinking, really? Because that's not something you hear about. It's always the little greys,
yes,
or it's always a spirit or something like that. But she doesn't follow it. She's not into any of this really. But she it's not something she talks about either. So he's asked me to go around and try and coax the story out of her a little bit more. But she claimed to have woke up one night, and at the bottom of her bed was a humanoid, on two legs, two arms, but the beige in colour, but with the head of a reptile. And he looked at her in shock, as if to say, you shouldn't be able to see me, before he ran out of the room.
Right. And that's not uncommon.
Yes. Well, I've obviously looked into this since, and I've come across several stories now where people are claiming to have come across Bigfoot. Was one that I came across, where Bigfoot stared at him as if to say, you can see me, before walking behind a tree and not coming out the other side. I would argue that he did come out the other side. What's actually happened is his frequency range had changed and he could no longer see it.
Right.
But this so I said to my friend when he told me the story, that just further backs up my belief that essentially that reptilian is always in the room, or he's been there several times before, and he's so used to the fact that we can't perceive him, we can't see him, that when someone actually makes eye contact and shows in their body language that they can see him, he's shocked. Yeah. And apparently she described it as, you would expect him to be threatening and to be, almost for her to be the one that should be scared. But apparently the experience left her feeling that it was the reptilian that was scared, that he shouldn't have been seen before he ran out of the room.
Well, one of the, when you're saying that this stuff is all one thing. I'm not. I sometimes I go there and sometimes I don't. I often wonder, like, the Egyptians had different parts of us. That each one of us consisted of different parts.
Yeah.
And I wonder sometimes if the ego part of us sometimes remains here for a while. Like part of us rejoins but there's a part of us, that ego shell that sticks around that may contribute to hauntings sometimes.
Yeah, that's that's a fascinating. Just making a note of that. When we go away and have a look into that. Yeah, that's a fascinating way of looking at it. I mean, again, there are different types of hauntings. You tend to have that recording type of a haunting where it's this energy, it's this imprint of energy onto our reality. Where people say
stone tape.
Yeah, and that's what people tend to call a ghost, whereas a spirit is maybe a more intelligent, something that can interact with you and knows that you're there. But yeah, you have these kind of recordings. Maybe that's this ego type thing, this thing that's been left behind. Yeah, I've just finished making a note. I'm going to go and look at that. That's a very interesting way of looking at it.
The thing trying to see how to word this. I think it's all connected, but I think it's all connected through us. And I think poltergeist activity has a lot to do with it. And I think that poltergeist activity, at least the energy from it, comes from us. So I think when you see this stuff physically manifesting, it's generating from us. It may be something independent out there using that energy. But even like when we're talking about Bigfoot, most people out there looking for Bigfoot don't find a hairy ape. What they get are rocks thrown at them. They get vocalizations. They get mimicry. They get all the stuff you find if you're in a haunted house with a poltergeist, except in a wilderness setting.
Yeah, they're effectively dealing with a Bigfoot ghost.
Right. Or as Joshua Cutchin named it, the wilderness poltergeist.
Again, a fascinating way of thinking about it, because again, you're right. If I do believe that a lot of people who tend to have negative energy, a nasty haunting or a poltergeist activity, they tend to have some very bad stuff going on in their life.
Right.
Very, very often, more often than not. You can find something bad going on in that person's life, and it's not very often you hear anyone who has a pleasant haunting, is it? It's not, I share my house with an old man who's been here for 300 years. Sometimes he cooks me a bacon sandwich in the morning, and it's, you never really hear that. It's always, he was strangling me again in the middle of the night, and he was slamming my drawers and all that stuff. And you often find that they're having some bad stuff go on in their life, or they have had bad stuff, or maybe a bad upbringing or something. Yeah. So I'm massively on board with you there. Essentially, what you put out, this kind of law of attraction. Yeah. What you put out is what you get back, and you get that kind of negative energy back.
And I think part and I don't mean this in the sense that they're bad people, but I think when you have these ghost hunters who go in and everything's a demon, you're scaring the people. And if the energy is generating from those people, you've now put that much more negative energy into the air by suggesting that this is a demon.
Yeah, and the reason I laugh there is because I was only having this conversation the other day with someone that, isn't it, everything's always bad, isn't it? I don't know if it's because of things like, horror films, and again, you don't really. I remember Casper the Friendly Ghost, but you don't really see many TV shows or films where ghosts are portrayed in a good way. They're always this negative energy, this demonic type presence.
Right.
And I think that plays a big part in our perception of what a haunting is. And yeah, it's interesting. You see on the most haunted type TV shows and stuff, they always tend to come across bad energy, and when we're out ghost hunting and the public come with us, which they do sometimes, they're always so quick to jump to, we do spirit board sessions, and one of the questions is always, do you mean us harm? It's like, why are you asking that? Why do you feel the need to ask that question? This person could just be this entity or this energy or whatever could just be curious. It could just be trying to communicate with us. So why are we always assuming that it means us harm, or that it's negative.
Yeah.
Because by doing so, as you say, just by thinking you're in the vicinity of a negative entity or a scary entity, you will raise your heart rate, and therefore your anxiety will increase, and then you're basically making yourself experience these paranormal experiences, even though there's nothing paranormal about it whatsoever. It's just you've done it to yourself.
So one of the things you talk about in the book that I've always been kind of skeptical of is the whole orb phenomena.
Yeah. Is it dust, or is it a ghost?
Or an insect.
Or an insect. Yeah, I do touch on that in the book. It's I've had various, I've got various pieces of footage that show orbs, that show dust, and that clearly show insects. And there's ways of telling them. For me, dust, if there's plenty of them and they're all going in the same direction, it's definitely dust. And you have to look at the environment that you're in as well. If you're filming in a dirty tunnel, or if you're filming in an abandoned building, chances are it's going to be dust.
Yeah.
And if it's all going in the same direction, you can categorically say that it's dust. Same with insects. The only thing the only time it can't be dust is when you begin to see a light or an orb or something begin to move independently, backwards and forwards, and at its own free will. At that point, you can rule out dust, in my opinion. So now it becomes a spirit or an insect. Chances are it's an insect, and sometimes you can see the little wings. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If the film's good enough or the footage is good enough, and you can zoom in and deal with the contrast and stuff, and you can see the little wings flapping, and
Right.
you can tell it's an insect. But there are times where you can't quite tell. Now, whoever it was that said an orb is the manifestation of a spirit, I don't know who that was. I don't know any scientific evidence that they had to back it up.
Right.
But it's just one of those things that has now gone into folklore, where people say, yeah, of course, everybody knows that an orb is the early stage of a spirit manifestation, like it's a scientifically proven fact. But it's not. There is no scientifically proven fact for most of what we've discussed tonight.
Right.
So I don't get the deal with orbs. However, I do detail in the book a very, very weird and strange occurrence that happened to us. We were at the time recording in a tunnel. It's a place called Drakelow Tunnels. It's an old Cold War type nuclear bunker. And we were at the time playing some Vera Lynn, some classic 1940s World War II type music, because that would have been the people that were down there at the time, just to see if we could get any interaction with them. And we were dancing around at the time, dancing to the music, and someone was filming us. There was me and another member of the group dancing, and you can see the dust. So it's an interesting video because we're kicking dust up off this floor, and you can see it all going in one direction. And about 25 seconds or so into the video, just as I'm dancing, this red orb comes around me at waist height, around my back, towards the camera, and goes from left to right in front of the camera, bright red. And as it gets closer, you can see that in fact it's two very small orbs that are going round each other, almost as if they're dancing. And the people filming it, you hear them on the footage, cry out, "What the hell's that?" as this thing flies off the camera. I've never been able to explain that, because it was clearly not the dust, because you could see what the dust was. I can't imagine how it could have been an insect, because it was glowing red. I've never come across any insects down there. We've been down there dozens of times, and all of the footage that we've taken, we've never seen any live animals or insects or spiders or anything. That you're about 400 feet underground at its deepest point.
Wow.
And strangely, you'd think there'd be loads of creepy crawlies around, but there doesn't seem to be. And it's just the way that it looks like it's dancing as it comes past the camera. It's an extremely, anybody that wants to see this, I'm happy to send it to anybody that wants to see it. If you can explain to me what it is, I'd be grateful.
You don't have it up on YouTube or anything?
No. I can put it on my Facebook page. Anybody that wants to see it, I always say, just let me know. I've got loads of evidence, and I'm happy for anybody to see it. The thing is, I don't really do social media when it comes to the ghost hunting and stuff, because it's so politically loaded. It's so full of infighting and stuff like that, I tend to just keep away from all of that. But if anybody ever wants to see any of my evidence, they've just got to let me know, and I'll send it to them. But it's a fantastic piece of footage that I've never been able to explain.
I remember many years ago, there was a Buffalo, New York paranormal group, and they would constantly be posting all the orb pictures they got, and I was just amazed that they didn't have the common sense to realize what was happening. Like one of them, they were walking through a graveyard with tall grass in the, the spring or the fall or something. And they took a picture of the grave because someone said they felt something there and there was nothing there. And then they walked past it. And then they turned around and took another picture and they're like, look at all the orbs. And I'm like, you just stirred up pollen and dust, and you're taking a picture at night with a flash. Of course you're going to get orbs.
Again, I mean, sometimes I don't know whether what we're seeing there is just pure stupidity, naivety, or is it they're so desperate to prove that that ghosts exist.
Right.
They're either, there's two options. They're either willing to put their logic to one side, and they know that they're putting their logic to one side, or they genuinely believe what they're seeing is spirit activity in order to make their beliefs real.
And some of that can come down to just an ignorance of how the equipment works too.
But I think you're right, because I could turn my phone on right now, turn the camera on, and my house I like to think it's relatively clean, but I guarantee that within 10 seconds of turning my camera on, I could see about 5 what I could claim to be orbs.
Right.
But it's just dust, and particularly when you turn the flash on your camera, it obviously reflects off the dust particles and makes them much brighter. But again, something I try to explain in the first book, is how equipment works and certain things that you might capture that will be down to the equipment, not necessarily paranormal activity.
Yeah, and I mean, there's things like lens flares that people don't seem to understand. I took a picture outside my house just because it looked cool, and I noticed I was getting a lens flare from the fluorescent light on the house. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that looks kind of neat. And so I took the picture and I posted it, and I noted that there's a lens flare there from the fluorescent light in the house, and people are going, you got a figure in your picture. And I'm like, no, it's a lens flare. Trust me.
And the thing is, you're the person that took the picture, and it doesn't matter how much you tell them, no, it's a lens flare. They will believe what they want to believe, and they'll see what they want to see. There's no telling them. I
mean, I've had a few weird orb encounters, where I'm, and even at the same time, I'm like, that's weird. I can't easily explain that, but still, it's an orb, so I'm hesitant,
Yeah. It's the thing is, I'm hesitant with everything. We've captured some really good stuff, as detailed in the book, and even when you've debunked everything and you're left with no other reasonable explanation as to what it could be, there's still always something in me saying it can't be. It can't be. And I guess that's why I get accused of being a skeptic.
Yeah. I don't so much say it can't be, but I also accept that there may be something I'm not thinking about.
Yeah, which is again why I'm the recent presentation that I was giving to groups just before we got put into lockdown was around this book, and it was essentially me just presenting my evidence and the things that we'd captured, and I'm happy for anybody, as I say, to request any of it, and I'll send it, because sometimes it's with a fresh set of eyes. And in fact, a great time this happened was I was giving a talk to a UFO group, and there was a video clip of a house, and it's a really good clip, because you get an orb, you get what sounds like a voice, you get the light turns itself on, and then you hear this rattling noise, So the orb could easily be explained away, as we've already discussed.
Yeah.
The light turning itself on, I'm not quite sure about. The voice could have been anyone in the house at the time. But the rattling, I could never quite... What is that rattling? Now, it's only about a 10-second clip, but during the clip, they've got quite a large dog that walks down the hallway and disappears into the living room. And someone put their hand up and said, that rattling noise is the dog shaking, and that's the collar that you can hear. And... I'd watched this video dozens of times. I'd been to the house. I know the dog. And I was like, God, why didn't I think of that? And sometimes you can't see the woods for the trees because you're so engrossed in trying to work out what it is that you're blind to the obvious. And yeah, this guy put his hand up and said, that's the dog shaking and rattling his collar. And I was like, yes, it is. and I kept it in. I kept it in the presentation because I then used that as a great example of how to debunk experiences and how not everything is paranormal.
And how you're not always going to think of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to put my hand up and say, I overlooked that. Don't know how, but I overlooked that one. And I thanked the guy after the presentation for pointing that out. But yeah, that's why I'm always happy to share evidence, because you never know what people do. And equally the opposite. I've shared evidence and people have said, did you not see that there? When there's something I've missed actually that could be paranormal, as opposed to debunking it. That's actually happened as well. But I know several investigators who are so reluctant to share evidence. I don't know why. I don't know what they plan on doing with it. But to me, the whole point of collating evidence is to share with people and to help further the field and help, research it together. I'm certainly not one for keeping pictures in a locked folder on my computer and not sharing it with anyone. I'm more than happy for... I don't know if they're scared of people mocking them, scared of people telling them that it's fake, I know that nothing that I've captured is purposely faked. And if anybody can tell me what it is, and I can see that from that perspective, then I'm very much obliged.
So one of the things you talk about in the book is the Guy Cliff's house, or Guy's Cliff.
Yes.
Yeah. What kind of activity did you get there?
That was a weird one for me because that's like the last one we've done really. It was in between lockdowns, so we were allowed out for a bit, and we decided to go there. And it was a very good night because it was what we called an investigators' night. There were 6 or 7 teams all there. So there was no what we called the public. They were all seasoned investigators, and it was great because they'd all the weird and the wonderful equipment that they use. People had got homemade spirit boxes, and really really interesting evening. But one of the fascinating things we got there was some knocking, where there was this old. It's used predominantly now as a Freemasons lodge. But there is this external bit that burnt down. ITV were filming, I think it was a Sherlock Holmes TV program there, and they had a huge fire during production and burnt down a large part of this. It's like a stately home come castle type place, and so we were around in this cellar bit around the back of the stables, and it's one of those old studded wooden doors. And if you opened the door, you went down about 10 steps into this circular room, and as we came out of the room and closed the door, we thought we could hear some knocking. We're like, what was that? So we've knocked on the door and waiting for something to come back. And eventually we heard these really faint knocks, really faint. We were about to leave, and someone was like, hang on a minute, I think I just heard it. So we repeated the knocks and we got them back. And so one person went and stood inside the room at the bottom of the steps because it sounded like the knocks were coming from far away. They certainly weren't being knocked on the door. It was coming from inside the room. So this guy went and stood at the bottom of the stairs, and we knocked and we waited for him to tell us if he'd heard it back. And he said that he did, but he couldn't pinpoint where it was. Obviously, the room was stone, and you wouldn't have got that knocking on a stone. It was very echoey, but very far away. So we swapped him over, and somebody else went and said, you go and see if you can see where this is coming from. And again, we were getting the knocks back, and we know it wasn't an echo because the time delay was different with each occurrence. And the knocks back were different in quantity, so we know it wasn't a direct echo. But the person that went in as well, so to them, even though for us on the outside it was as if it was coming from inside the room, the people in the room said it doesn't sound like it's coming from inside this room. We don't know where it's coming from, and it was something that we just couldn't explain. And then we also had some very good stuff with we have like a little plastic ball. And it's very easy to purchase. It's just, if you roll it, I think it's used for like cats and stuff like that. If you roll it, it turns on and starts flashing. So It's a very good trigger object to use. The problem with it is that it's a ball. So if you put it on an uneven surface, it's going to trick you into thinking that a ghost has touched it. So we were out in the stable area, and it's out in, so there's no roof because the ITV production company have burnt it down. So that there's no roof, but there's these kind of little rooms you can go into where the stables were, with this central kind of corridor running down the middle. There's no electric out there either. We're outside now essentially, and we had a lot of activity on the K2 meter, and it was kind of guiding us, because if we deviated off the path, it stopped until we came back, and then it started up again. So that was quite interesting, and it led us into this room. And when we were in there, we put our equipment down and we put this little ball down, and what we thought, we thought we put it down steadily and sturdy, and it started to flash. It caught our eye. So as if something had moved it. So you have to reset it, essentially. You have to turn it off and on again. And we put it back, and we made sure that we'd wedged it, in between, because it was on like a stone ledge. We made sure that we'd wedged it in between a couple of bricks so it wouldn't move on its own. And it happened about 3 or 4 times. The ball kept lighting up as if it was being moved, while the K2 was kind of going off as well. And I'm very dubious of K2s, because they could easily be affected by mobile phones and fuse boxes and stuff like that. But all of our phones were off, and there was no electric out there. No lights or fuse boxes or anything like that. And to have that happen at the same time as this ball seemed to be moving on its own as well, it made for a rather interesting couple of hours, when we were out there with the knocking in the cellar and that activity in the stables.
Yeah, the fact that it was leading you is what really fascinates me.
Yeah, because, we were going down this, it was all open air, but if you can picture like this corridor type thing with these little stables coming off the side, and we were interested, we were intrigued, so we were going in all these rooms, but when we were going into the rooms, the activity just stopped. So we thought, we'll go to the next room. So as we've come out and got back onto that corridor path, it started again, and we even turned round and went backwards, and it stopped until we turned back round and headed the way we were going before, and it started lighting up again. And then eventually we got into like the 5th or 6th room that we decided to veer off into, and this time it kept going. So we were like, so this is where it wants us to be. And that's where we put this ball down, this trigger object. And for about 10 minutes or so, to the point where we were asking, we were talking, and it was responding to what we were saying, while the ball was, kind of kicking off in the background as well. Really, really interesting. And then it just stopped. So the ball, didn't move again. After about 3 or 4 minutes, it all happened rather quickly, and the K2 activity just completely dropped down as well. So we went back onto the path thinking, maybe it wants us to go somewhere else, but we couldn't get anything. We were walking up and down the path trying to reconnect with whatever this thing was, and we were getting no activity whatsoever. And that's something that fascinates me, because if there is a current there or some kind of electrical equipment that we weren't aware of, it would still be there.
Right.
When you go back out onto the path, it would kick up again. But we couldn't get anything, no matter how we tried. And so it's almost like this thing had just got bored or tired or whatever, and just left us, and we couldn't get a thing.
Huh. Do you think this stuff like intentionally avoids cameras sometimes?
Yeah, don't we all? I think it just gets tired, maybe. I think it gets bored. I think it gets fed up. I mean, there are locations, particularly here in the UK, that are so overdone, shall we say. They have ghost hunts on a Friday, a Saturday, sometimes like a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening. And, if this thing is an energy, as I believe it to be, this energy can be drained. And, if we do it too much, it's almost like a performing monkey, I'm sure at some point it just doesn't have the energy to perform anymore. And equally, we've been to places that haven't been done as much, and the activity seems to be a little bit better there. And we've also been to places where, we're the first people there. No one else has ever been there. And it's amazing, actually, that how sometimes the activity can be really weak in those places, almost as if it doesn't know who you are. It's never had to do it before. So it's a little bit cautious. It kind of stands back because it doesn't know what you're expecting of it. And then like the pub, for example, that I spoke of, we've done that place about 6 times now. And each time the activity has increased because I feel like they're getting used to us and it's beginning to understand what we want from it, And that's something you have to bear in mind. When people are talking to these entities saying smile for the camera or make this K2 meter flash, these things, who's to say they even know what a K2 meter is?
Yeah, exactly.
We talk about playing Vera Lynn music to try and fit in with the 40s, and some of this equipment that I said these investigators had at Guy's Cliff, that they were making period pieces. They were making REM pods or spirit boxes that looked like 1940s radios and stuff like that to try and appeal to potentially the era of the spirit that they were dealing with. And I think that's something we have to bear in mind. We always assume that these things can spell, and when it really just pushes the glass around the board and doesn't make much sense. Maybe we're talking to a 3-year-old. Maybe we're talking to someone from the 1600s who was illiterate.
Right.
Maybe we're talking to an energy that has never inhabited a human body, so doesn't really know what language is. So many possibilities. Again, if we allow this predetermined belief or this predetermined structure of ghost hunting to dictate what we do, we really limit our possibilities as to what we can find.
Absolutely. I ask about the cameras for 2 things. One, when you get apports and such, when stuff disappears or reappears, even people never see this stuff happen generally, and it never happens on camera. Like I know you were talking about one with the clothes, that formerly was downstairs, suddenly came flying off like a dresser upstairs.
Yes. So this is a house that I investigated, did a bit of a case study down in Essex. Not too far, only about 5 or 6 miles from Enfield, of course, the famous Enfield haunting. And this family were really going, through the walls with this entity. It's not a nice thing. It's still going on now. But obviously, I can't go down and investigate at the moment. But yeah, so this family was so kind of scared of this thing, and it was taking over their lives. They set up cameras throughout the house to try and capture what this thing was. And for 2 to 3 months, they were sleeping downstairs. Quite a large family. So you had the mum, the dad. They had 2 autistic 8-year-old twins. They had a couple of teenagers that were living there as well, and their boyfriends and what have you. So it was a busy house, and they were all camping in the living room on a night time because they were too scared to be upstairs. And one of the cameras that they fitted was right at the back of the landing area. So you go up the stairs onto the landing, and at the end of the room, at the end of the landing, there's 2 doors, one left and one right, but nothing actually on the back wall. It's just a dead end. And they fit this camera right in the corner of that hallway, just as the wall meets the ceiling. There was nothing behind there. And we tried this. We tried to stand behind the camera to see if we could hide behind the camera. And you can't. Because the camera was motion sensor. So as soon as you go near it to try and get behind it, it's going to turn on.
Right.
And also, we put I'm not a slim guy, and we put the slimmest guy we could find behind the camera, and you can still see him there. You could see like the top of his head just in the bottom corner of the camera. And yet what this footage shows is it's about 2:30, 3 in the morning. It's because they were sleeping downstairs. There's some pajamas, like a onesie, and a pair of slippers. And because it's a motion sensor, it doesn't turn on until these clothes come into view. But knowing the house how I do, there's nothing behind there. So just as the camera turns on, these clothes appear basically out of the ceiling. and they're launched in front of the camera onto the landing area. And there's another pile of clothes on the floor, and they're launched onto the pile of clothes, and they've come from nowhere. And the mom, Kelly, told me, yeah, well, they're the slippers that my child was wearing downstairs before we went to bed, and he'd left them at the bottom of the stairs. So they'd somehow got from the bottom of the stairs upstairs, coming essentially through the ceiling and landing on the floor. And I've got that footage. If anybody would like to see that again, I'm happy to share that.
The other one that stands out to me is when Steve Merrow was investigating Keith Linder's what gets known as the Seattle Demon House, and they turned on the infrared cameras testing them, and they have a whole host of voices talking, and none of it's them. And when they turn on the infrared, you hear a voice very specifically say, "Ooh, we don't like that."
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, let me make a note. What is this?
That is I could send you a link to the interview.
Great. Okay.
That would be the easiest way, because I don't know where he has that published. Keith Linder has a book out. It might be in that, but I haven't finished his book yet.
Okay.
But like when we talk about frequencies and stuff, I mean, that would make sense to me that, if these things are coming from the infrared, especially shining infrared light at them, might be blinding to them.
Yeah, it would be overload, I guess. We've got these pieces of equipment, infrared cameras, ultraviolet torches, ultraviolet cameras, stuff like that allow us to see outside of our range of perception, and essentially into theirs, and by saying, oh, we don't like that, it could be saying, oh, we don't like the fact that you can now see us.
Oh, that could also be, yeah.
We prefer to, like that reptilian I mentioned earlier, we prefer to kind of be here unseen.
Yeah. We're just about out of time. Would you stick around a little bit for a Patreon segment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because there's still a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about here. Okay. So tell people where they can find you and where they can get the books.
Sure. So you can go onto Amazon and get the books. If you just search for my name, I think there's like an author's page where the two books are.
Yes, spell your name for people.
Okay. So my name's Kieran, so it's Kieran Woodhouse, Woodhouse. Kieran Woodhouse. And yeah, if you just go onto Amazon, you can find the books there. You can get them in paperback or ebook. I think you can get the ebook of the first one on different online like ebook shops, like is it Mills and Boon in America, and is it? I don't know. Is it Mills and Boon?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm naming just random bookshops, I think, but they're available on all of those kind of shops, like Google Books and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Or if you'd like a physical copy signed, because I know some people do, just let me know. Again, you can contact me at kieran.woodhouse at gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to send you a copy hand posted.
Nice. And no website or anything?
No, it's something I'm working on literally as we speak, really.
Okay.
Because I host the Paranormal Paradigm podcast for anyone that might be interested in that.
Yes.
And that has a Facebook page. So if you go to Facebook and head over to Paranormal Paradigm, so it's facebook.com/The Paranormal Paradigm, you'll get to my page there where I put all the shows and stuff. But yeah, I think I'm about 75-80% through doing the website now, because people always ask me, and the thing is, I'd like to just fly under the radar, like I say, there's so much infighting and politicizing in the paranormal world. Even this week I've had friends falling out over stuff, and I just don't want to be involved in that, so I kind of just keep my head down.
Sure.
Promote my books by doing things, such as your shows and my own podcast. I go out to talk to the groups, and I get kind of private bookings through that. People asking me to go and do their house or their place of work or whatever and investigate there. And that's kind of what I do. But I do see the need for probably a website, so I've decided to start with that.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, and we'll continue this on a Patreon segment.
Thank you for having me.
So here I want to thank all of my Patreons. Without you, this show would probably not be a reality. But I especially want to thank those who are pledging $10 or more: Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Eric Curvin, Tim, Ad Noctum, Patricia Gaia Quinta, Alex Whitcomb, Alfred Tuttle, American Rambler, Andy McNamara, Barbara Fisher, Becky Traynor, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limita, Charles Davis, Chris Ernst, Craig Parmenter, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Dominic O'Malley, Edu Camahort, Empty K, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Janet Bunderson, Jennifer Campbell, Joanna Rojas, Jose A., Carla Mahoney, Kevin, The 100th Monkey Project, Kevin Schreck, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Jim and Sophie, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matthew Sproul, Maddie, Nagatha Christie, Patricia W., Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sheeran, Sedgter, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor, 36 Dingo, Vincent Treewell, Walker, Will Powell, William Lovelace, and Stephen D. Thank you all so much for your support. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.